All right, you guys. Uh, if you've got your handout ready, go ahead and pull that up. If not, then just follow along with me. I'm going to be uh, going back and forth between showing me and just showing the handout on the screen. It's going to be up on my screen the whole time. But just a little background. Uh, you already know that you get what you pay for. Most photographers are wonderful, caring people, but they aren't necessarily good business people, myself included. It took me a long time to get to figure this stuff out. That being said, 19 out of 20 photographers that start a photography business will go out of business within 3 years. Now, that doesn't mean they put their camera away. That doesn't mean they never ever do another photo session. It doesn't mean that. They love photography. They just can't figure out how to make a profitable business out of it. So it's not because their photographs aren't good, but usually because they can charge an amount that is less than it costs to do business. That's normally the problem, is they're charging an amount that is just too small. Now let's get to specific numbers. If a low volume photographer charges, say, $70 for an 8x10. Now, low volume was the key here in this sentence. Low volume. Let's define that real quick. Do you guys know when I say low volume? Give me a thumbs up if you know what it is that I'm saying. In fact, do this the whole way through this session. Give me a thumbs up or a clap down in the reactions. Just hover your cursor over the screen, and down the bottom you'll see reactions. And if you agree with something, you can hit the clap. If you understand something or you agree with something, you could put thumbs up. Heart if you just love something. But I want to see those reactions as we're going through, because that tells me that you're understanding what's going on, and I can continue. Or it may tell me that you need a little more assistance, a little more thoughts and ideas on that subject. So when I say low volume, do you know exactly what it is when I say that? Because I want to define it. I'm going to define it. I see one up. I see Daniel's thumb going up. So low volume versus high volume, or something in between. Low volume means a very small number of sessions where you're giving a huge amount. There's more than one way to describe this, but you're giving a large amount of time to your clients. Your goal isn't to just fast forward through everything. For instance, if you're doing a mini session and you're only giving 5 minutes, 10 minutes per session, well, then your goal is to speed through it. Doesn't mean you're being rude to your client. It just means you have a different business model. Therefore, you don't have time to give them all the time that you could if you were doing just one client for a short period of time. Low volume generally means fewer than 5 in a week. 5 in a week, not 5 in a day, 5 in a week. So if you're doing 5 in a month, it may mean you're a low volume photographer, but it could also mean that you're having trouble getting clients. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're a low volume photographer. But low volume means you're spending more time with your clients. So if you are a low volume photographer and you are charging less than $70 for an 8x10, I can guarantee you're going to go out of business. Guarantee it. I'm going to show you the numbers in a little while to prove it to you. Right now, I'm just telling you what that is. Photographers invest, low volume portrait photographers invest a huge amount of time before even the first image is created. Time on the phone, time crafting the email responses, planning, prep, drive time. They'll spend about 30 minutes to 2 hours for the photography session itself, then backing up, initial editing and culling, then the presentation of the images where the client gets to see the original images. Some photographers do this, and some photographers do this online. I don't recommend showing your photographs online if you're a low volume portrait photographer. Are there times when it's appropriate to put your photographs online and let people see them? Of course there is. There's some very obvious ones, like for wedding photographers. The guests will never be able to see those photographs unless you put them online for them to be able to see them. I do still recommend, though, that you show the bride and groom those photographs in person before you've shared it with the world. But That's another subject, another day that we'll talk about that. Then the photographer does the fine tuning to the images. Once the images have been chosen, that client has chosen or purchased those images, then you're going to spend some time with Lightroom, some time with Photoshop, or whatever image manipulation program you use. And this can take quite a bit of time. On average, I found that images take around 30 minutes, but sometimes they take a lot less, and there's times when they take a lot more. If you're doing something like Daniel likes to do, where you're doing composites and lots of different pieces and parts, a lot of variables, I'm sure those can take huge numbers of hours, depending on the complexity, depending on the goal of that image. Am I right, Daniel?
Oh, yes. Way too much time.
And of course, we've got to recoup some kind of income for that time, because if you were employed by someone else, you would be paid for that time. At least you'd be expected to be paid for that time. As a self-employed person, if you don't pay yourself for that time, then effectively you're the worst freaking boss ever. And why be the worst boss to yourself? I mean, aren't you the best employee? You should pay yourself well, not zero. Too many photographers forget that they are a cost, because you are both employer and employee. So therefore, you've got to pay yourself. We're going to talk about how much also, but not just yet. When we take all that time and we add it up, you have a minimum of 9 hours that you've invested, minimum. I'd say it's probably at least 15 at this point for most of us. Let's say the client, by the way, I'm going to give you a couple of stats real quick. The average amount of time that it takes photographers to photograph a family portrait, a low volume photographer photographing a family portrait with all those variables, all the planning, the drive time, all those variables, everything that went into it. The average amount of time for one family portrait for a low volume photographer is 21 hours. 21. Give me a thumbs up if you heard that. Thanks, Amber. Thanks, guys. All right, 21 hours. Now, I want to know, do you think that's about right? Or are you surprised that that's the number? And you can put that in chat. Are you surprised, or is that exactly what you would expect? 21 hours for the average family portrait session. Now, you're only spending between half an hour and 2 hours with them at the session. But the total amount of time that you have invested is 21. Yep. Seems like a lot. Yeah. So I got Daniel responding. Anybody else going to respond in chat? You guys are working on it, right? You just have a bit surprised. Yeah. Cool. Keep those coming. I'm going to move on though. So for most of us, again, it's a minimum of 9. Minimum of 9, because we're including drive time, we're including phone calls, we're including the time it took you to craft emails. Anything that is directly attributable to that client is time invested with that client. It is not just the 30 minutes to 2 hours you spend with them in person. Too many of us forget about that variable. But I guarantee you, if you were an employee and your employer only paid you for the time you were spending with the client, not all the other time, you'd have a problem with that. Let's say, Amber, the only time they paid you at your office was when you were with a client. The work that you do that doesn't directly involve, the client in front of you. If the client is not in front of you, you don't get paid a dime. How would you feel about that?
I would quit.
Exactly. And how many of us photographers take that into consideration when building our price list?
We don't.
Yeah. A situation that most of us would quit, we are allowing ourselves to do it. Talk about being the worst freaking boss ever. Most photographers are horrible bosses to themselves when it comes to the prices. So add it up. You have at least 9 hours here. If the client orders just one 8x10, which in a family portrait could happen, I don't know if you guys have done it, a high school senior, a baby portrait. Someone could order just one 8x10. Now, Javi, how much am I going to pay if I get my 8x10 from Digital Pro Lab? How much am I going to be paying at the highest amount with the most expensive paper? If I am making you guys do the color balancing, what's the most I could possibly pay, and what's the least? What's the range?
Yeah, I mean, so if you're on like our if you're on our monitor match, professional software, all that kind of stuff, low end for an 8x10, you're probably looking at about $3 range. As far as like the highest end, if you want the best paper, everything like that, you're probably looking at a little bit closer to 15.
Perfect. Yeah, that's what I usually tell people, in the 5 to 15 range. So anything under 5 is shocking. It's very inexpensive. I think anything 15 and under is very inexpensive. By the way, the amount that you're charging for your prints is an extreme amount, a lot more than what the lab is charging. You're not a reseller for the lab. We as photographers aren't resellers for the lab. It's not like I'm wearing a Digital Pro Lab name tag with my name on it when I'm going out and talking to clients. I am not a reseller for my lab. So the amount that the lab charges is really not that big a deal in the overall scheme of things. When I am building my price list, the amount the lab charges is a consideration, but it is not that big a deal. Even at 15 bucks, it's just not that big a deal. So if you're charging $20 for your 8x10, you're going out of business if you're a low volume portrait photographer. If the client only orders an 8x10 and you're charging $70 for it, let's say that you're paying $5 for that 8x10. Divide the $65 by the 9 hours, because it's $70 that they charged minus $5 for the cost of the print. 9 hours, and that's on the low end, very low end. Average is 21. You're only making $7.22 an hour. Now, you're not going to make it at that amount. That's less than minimum wage. And we haven't even taken things out like taxes, gas, all your other expenses. So therefore, that's not what you're making per hour. You're making a whole lot less. I want to make something real clear. Photographers do not sell paper. Labs sell that. Second thing, the last step in the process is often the print. So let's do a hand gesture up here. If this is a timeline of the amount of time it takes to photograph and get the print to them, the printing part of it is this one little tiny section close to the end. That's all it is, that one little tiny section. So therefore, you've got to charge for the entire creative process, not just that one little section right at the end. What do you guys think of that? Do you agree? Give me a thumbs up. Good. So to be clear, photographers do not sell paper. That's what the labs sell. Photographers sell the entire creative process. As a photographer, as a photography business owner, more specifically, you are a marketer and seller of photographic services. You guys have probably heard this question before, but I'm curious as to what you're going to say. So in the chat, answer this real quick. What's your most valuable asset? There you go. Time, skill. Good job. Perfect. Good answers. Creative vision. Okay, I definitely. These are all some good answers. Your time is an extremely invaluable asset. Your creative vision, as Daniel has said it very well, is definitely a valuable asset. But without time, it doesn't matter how strong your creative vision is. So I put time at the top because it is universal to all of us. How much is your time worth? much do you think your time should be worth? I mean, let's say that you were, excuse me, let's say you had a full-time job and your goal really was just to cover that so that you could go full-time. Has anybody been in that situation before, or in that situation where your goal really is to get out of a full-time job so that you can do photography as a full-time job? So you're trying to cover whatever you're getting in right now, you want to be able to cover that. So therefore, whatever you're making per hour is the minimum amount that you can make. So if you take that average 21 hours, multiply that by the amount you're making now, what number is that? Just on a notepad, just write what that is. It's going to be different for everybody. So either write what you're making now, or write what you would like to ideally make per hour. Multiply that by the amount of hours that it takes you to do a job. And again, it's extreme minimum 9 hours if you're a low volume photographer. Family portraits take me 21 hours on average. Now, I suppose I should tell you what I do during that, for that time, because your process is going to be different than mine. So let's talk about that real quick. You guys have those numbers. We're going to go in more specifics. I'll bring them back up in just a moment. Let's talk about what things you do that take your time. What non-business related things take up your time? Things that are not attributable to a client. You're welcome to put those in chat. What things take up your time for your business? I'm not talking about personal life. What things take up your time but are not directly attributable to any specific client? They're just for everybody. How about your marketing efforts? How about your website, which is a marketing effort? How about posts to Facebook, Instagram, wherever else you are, TikTok? Education. Yep, photography education, ongoing thing. At the very least, you should be watching some YouTube videos every week. You have a lot of things that you do in your business that you can't really, there is no way to directly attribute those to any specific clients. If you're building your own website, is this time consuming? Has anybody built their own website? Yeah. Does this take you time? Oh gosh, yes. And then you're continuously tweaking it. So therefore it's a never ending thing. Same thing with posts and going on to Facebook and other social media, just reading, keeping up with what's going on. These are time consuming things that are not directly attributable. I want you to write that kind of stuff down. But the goal here really is to differentiate between attributable and non-attributable activities that you do in your business. Let's talk about those things that are directly attributable. The things that you do before a client gets booked. So you've got the stuff that you're doing online to hopefully get some interest in. You may be doing some mailings. You may be doing a blog, like Michelle just said. There's several different things that you may be doing. But those things aren't directly attributable yet. Once, though, they respond, let's say they fill out your web form, they send you an email, they give you a phone call. At that point, the time you spend with them is directly attributable. So therefore, the things that you do before a client is booked, if they send you an email, they fill out your web form, you're going to respond either via a phone call or an email, or it's possible it's a text also. You're going to respond. It's going to take you some time to craft that message. Now, if you're smart, you're going to spend some time crafting that message the very first time, and then you're going to save that in a file. So therefore, you can just use that and tweak it for the next person, instead of reinventing the wheel every single time you write a response. Don't do that. Create a response folder, different types of responses. So therefore, you're not having to start from scratch every single time. That'll save you some time. But how much time are you spending doing that? It's different for every single client. You've got some clients that are, boom, ready to buy right now. And so it just doesn't take that long at all. But is that the norm for you? For some businesses, it is the norm. Yep. It depends on the type of work you do, the type of client you're attracting. But for a lot of photographers, it just isn't. It takes a lot of back and forth before something actually happens, because there's some questions. You send them an email, they respond back with a couple of questions, you respond back, it goes back and forth. You're taking time to do this. At that point in time, though, your goal should be to get on the phone, either a phone or a Zoom call. I like Zoom call. I like seeing people's faces. But my goal is to get to that phone call or that Zoom call. That's my goal, because I don't want this back and forth thing going on, because I know how much time it takes. And my goal is to increase or improve the customer relationship. And it doesn't get improved via email. It doesn't get improved via text. There are times when you have written something, I know for sure, you have written something via text or email, and it's been responded to in a way that you didn't anticipate because they misunderstood the text. Where if you would have said it to a person, they would have understood it. You understand how sarcasm works. If you do sarcasm in a text, it will likely be misunderstood unless the person you're talking to is someone you talk to all the time. Have you experienced this? I would assume everybody has experienced a time when their words were misunderstood. So of course you have experienced this. So that time you spend, directly attributable to a client, the time you spend before a client gets booked, how many hours is that? How long does it take you to craft an email message? For some, it takes them 2 minutes, 5 minutes. Others, it takes them 15 minutes, sometimes longer. Depends on what it is you're writing. The back and forth going on, I'd say an average of an hour to 2 hours is the time that it takes beforehand, but it could be much longer. It sometimes takes up to 7 what I call touches. That could be email or text or phone call or in person, whatever the different just touches. It could take up to 5 to 7 touches before you actually get a client to book with you. It can take that long. Again, there's others that book immediately. Now, what about the design consultation? This is a planning session. If you're doing low volume photography, you are making plans. You're not just showing up and pressing a button. The neighbor could have done that. You don't do what the neighbor can do. You're a professional photographer. Therefore, you have a planning session with your client, period. And this takes time. You're planning what it is that you want as an end result first. Then you're planning how you're going to do it. So you don't start off by saying, well, what kind of background do you want? You start off by finding out what they want with this photograph. So for me and family, I specialized, well, I did specialize, now I'm specializing in helping other photographers, but I specialize in emotional family portraits as home decor. So therefore, the type of client I attracted wanted the photograph that we created to go up on their wall. Now you may say, well, how do you get that kind of client? I can tell you that, but it won't be in today's class because we need to get to what the prices are here. But the design consultation, the planning session takes time. I'd say extreme minimum half an hour, but usually between an hour and 2 hours is how long the planning session takes. Now, I need to throw in another variable here. If you're driving to the planning session, you need to add in your drive time. And in San Antonio, I'd say half an hour there and half an hour back. So you've got to add 1 hour to however long you think it takes if you do in-person planning sessions. If drive time is part of the deal, you need to add that into this number. So right now you should have the amount of time it takes you to an average amount, a small amount of how much it takes you to book a client, then how long it takes you to plan the session. Now, the things that you do after a client is booked, before the session actually happens, this takes a little bit of time. What kind of things are that? You're putting things into your calendar. You're doing whatever steps, whatever procedures that you personally choose to do for your business. Everybody's going to be a little bit different here. If I was doing a private session, we'd actually go over these specific things about what takes up your time. But you guys just kind of estimate what that would be. And I'm trying to turn something off here. There we go. So estimate what that be. Now, once this, and then of course you've got planning the prep time for your session. Now, that's getting your batteries ready, making sure you have all the equipment together that you need. Now, the session itself, the next section. How long does the session itself take? Again, if you are driving to your session, if you've got a studio and people are coming to you, you don't have to add drive time. But a lot of photographers don't have that, so they need to add the drive time. Or maybe even if they do have a studio, they've got to drive to their studio. They don't stay there all day. So if drive time is part of the deal, you've got to add drive time to this list. So for the session, how long does it take? Usually 30 minutes to 2 hours is how long a photography session takes. Mine usually are half an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. It's very rare that it would take me 2 hours. And I don't roam around because I know what I'm doing when I get there. So roaming around just shows that I have a lack of planning. Now, it's possible though, part of the planning was to roam. So that's entirely possible. But for the most part, I know what the end result is supposed to be. So therefore, I only go to the spot that I need to gain that result. I don't need a whole bunch. If you were a gold miner, are you going to mine every single square foot, or are you just going to go to the places that are most likely to have the gold? Pretty easy solution here. So for me, when I'm doing a session, I go to whatever I know is going to cause me to be able to reach the goals that we had during the design consultation, during the planning session. And that's it. We take care of that. We get what we need and we go on, because you've got things to do that take up your time, and they do too. By the way, a client does not appreciate you giving an hour more photography time if it doesn't cause better photographs to happen. If the very first photograph is the one they chose and it took you 2 hours to do it, they're not going to be happy with that. They're going to think something's wrong with you, because how could you not know as the pro? Why did it take you 2 hours to do something you could do in 5 minutes? You think giving them more time is going to make them happy? It doesn't. It doesn't. They may say that at first, but they have other things to do. So take care about them to not spend time that you don't need to spend. After the session, I come back here, I load my photographs to the computer. I go get a drink or a snack while it's loading. And then I get on Lightroom and I cull it. I get rid of the ones that I don't want. And I do a second culling. So I reduce that number down, and I'm only showing them about, for a family portrait, I'm showing them extreme minimum is 20, extreme maximum is 40. So somewhere between 20 and 40 images is what I'm showing them. I have found the fewer I show them, the higher the sale. When I first started, it was a numbers thing. I thought if I get enough, they're going to find something that they like. And so I had a bunch that I would create and I would show them all those. That hurt the sale because it was information overload. It was overwhelmed. There were too many variables, too many things to choose from, and it became a frustrating sales process. Well, I don't want any part of this process to be frustrating. So therefore, I make it easy for them to choose, because I'm choosing the ones that fit the description of what we planned. And if they don't fit that description, well, first of all, I didn't create it if it didn't fit the description. But if I did, then they're not going to see it. So after the session is just the culling, the whatever it takes to get those images ready for presentation. Yes. And Shell asked, do you show them in person? I'm about to get to that one. So good segue, Shell. After the session includes whatever prep there is for the presentation of the images. I call it a portrait selection consultation. You guys call it whatever you want, but I call it portrait selection consultation. And this is done in person. Now, because of the COVID stuff, the COVID rules, I generally am now going to be doing this via Zoom. However, pre-COVID, every single time it was done in their home with a projector on their wall in the spot that we had already talked about it going into. And I project it in the size that is appropriate for the space so that they can see it in the appropriate size. Because having a size in someone's head, I've come across people who believe that an 8x10 is a big print. This may sound funny to you, but years ago, a dad called and he said, I want to do a family portrait for my family. We've never done one, and I want the big one. And I didn't know exactly. Amber, thank you for being here. I understand you have to go back to work, but thank you for taking your time with us. This dad called, said, I want the big one. And we talked a little bit before I came back to this, because I wanted to find out what the big one meant to him. Because beauty is in the eye of the beholder, so is size of prints. And so I asked him, what does that mean to you? And he said, he repeated and said, I want the big one. I want the 8x10. Now, I'm hoping you guys think that's hilarious, because I sure think that's hilarious. To me, an 8x10 is the largest of the small sizes. It's small. It's a gift size print. If it goes on my wall, it's because it's part of a collage, not because it's a standalone image. I create standalone images. So therefore I don't sell a whole lot of the smaller ones unless they're for gifts. So I think a 16 by 20 to a 20 by 30 is in the medium category, and anything that's more than 2 to 4 inches, feet. And by the way, I speak in feet when I'm selling photographs. I don't do it in inches. Every little thing you do that can differentiate yourself from the next photographer, that's a good thing. And when I speak of what's going to go on your wall, and in feet, it's going to be 2 feet, it's going to be 3 feet, it's going to be 4 feet. This is talking differently than other photographers talk. That causes them to realize you're serious. It also causes them to realize you're going to cost more, and it justifies it in their mind. By the way, I don't know what you guys' average sale is, but my average sale now, okay, my last 3 years of doing this, of doing family portraits full time was 2019. So over a year ago. It's not that I don't do them anymore. It's just I do no marketing whatsoever. So yes, some fall in my lap because of old business. So the last 3 years, 2017, 2018, 2019, for those 3 years, my average sale was over 3,800. Average sale. When you target families who want wall portraits, your average sale is just going to go higher anyway. What do you guys feel about a $3,800 average sale? Would you think that was good? Give me a thumbs up or a woohoo or something if you think that would be a good average sale. If you think that would be good for you, you'd like that. Now, when your average sale is $3,800, do you really care that the 8x10 cost you $15? You could not care any less. It's irrelevant to you. So therefore, whatever the lab charges, great. Whatever keeps them in business, I'm happy. But $15 for an 8x10 just seems like, who cares? That's just compared. By the way, how much do I charge for an 8x10? $350. If you're curious, $350 for an 8x10. So yeah, do you think I care about $15?
Hey, I gotta get going. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. Thanks, Michelle, for being here.
Thanks. I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.
Okay.
Nice to meet y'all. Bye.
All right, so we're at the last step, and that is well, I guess the 2 last steps: the portrait selection consultation and after the print order. So the time you spend at the portrait selection consultation usually is, you want this to be a short period of time. You don't want this to be super long. And so what does that mean? I want it to last 30 minutes or less. I want that session, that time I spend, and them paying me at the end, I want it to be 30 minutes or less. It can take longer, but I reduce the number of photographs to reduce the amount of time. So I'd put about an hour there, but if I've got to include drive time, then I've got to include quite a bit more time in there. And then after the print order has been made, I'm going back and I'm fine tuning those photographs. Now, this can be an area where you've got a lot of time invested, a huge amount of time invested. So for after the print order, if they've ordered 5 images and it takes you an hour per image, there's 5 hours right there. So whatever your average amount of time is for doing your prints, the type of print that you're doing, that's what goes there. And then, of course, sending it to the lab, getting it back from the lab, whether you've had them send it to you via mail or you go and pick it up, add this amount of time there. It's part of the process. What happens after that? Well, once I get my prints back, I check to make sure they're exactly the way I want them. If not, I send them back. And usually, by the way, nowadays, if there is a problem, it was me, not the lab. That's Digital Pro Lab. That's something to say about you guys, and well, Finerworks too, because I send business to them too. But almost always, if I have a problem, it was me. I forgot to do something. I noticed that they wanted me to fill in a thinness in their hair, and I forgot to do it, or it's usually me. Whatever it is, usually me. And so I do send it back. I send it back. If there's a problem, I send it back and get it reprinted. So that I've got to add some time for that. Then I'm also doing I'm processing it, I'm signing it, and I sign in gold. It's gold leaf with a heated ballpoint pen. So yes, I sign in gold. And then if it needs framing, then it gets framed. If it's a canvas, then with the wraparound, it doesn't need that. But then I go and I just take it to their home and install it on their wall. My goal is to be full service, meaning if I give them any work to do, then I do not fit the definition of full service. Let me repeat that. If I give them any work to do, any, then I am not in the category of full service. And I am full service, meaning when I'm done, there's nothing left for them to do. There's no printing. There's no, if a photographer were to deliver the prints, but not put them on the wall, they still have to put them on the wall. So there's work to be done. If there's still work to be done, then this is not the definition of full service. Now, depending on the type of work, this changes. For instance, if you're doing business headshots, sending a digital file could be done. That would be full service then. But for what I do, family portraits, done means it's on the wall for them to experience and have and enjoy and cry tears of joy every single day because they're experiencing, because it's there. That's full service to me. So I've got to add that amount of time. And it takes time to drive over there and set things up, put it up on their wall, make sure it's good, make sure they're happy with it, and then drive back home. So add all that up, and that's your total. That's your total. So hopefully you guys have a total there. If not, then do it on your own. But you need to know how long it takes you to photograph a single job. You've got to know this because you have to get paid. There are 8 steps to proper pricing. I'm going to rush through these. By the way, some of these are just thoughts and ideas. Number 1 is 2/3. If 2/3 of your clients are not complaining or saying something about your high price, then your prices are too low. 2/3 should say something about your price. Number 2, good, better, best. I only have a good and a best, but there's something to be said for having 3 options. Lay out your prices in a way that is positive to your client. I wouldn't call them good, better, best, but mine are standard prints and canvas. Now, I don't call them that. I give them names. I think everything should have a name, just like I think everything should have a home. I know where my keys are. They're on a hook right over there. If I were to go, if I'm somewhere where I've driven, my keys are in my right pocket. I keep things in their home so I don't have to spend time looking for them. Now, that doesn't mean I always do that, but that's my intent. So I want to reduce that amount of time. But I give everything a name. So I've got a standard print, this regular print, and canvas print. That's really all I have, just those 2. You guys do what's right for you. Price value relationship. We are in an artistic profession. But even if this was a car, if I say which is better, the $50,000 car or the $20,000 car, people assume that the one with the higher price is the better product. Now, it doesn't mean they can afford it. It doesn't mean that's the one they're going to choose. But if you were to just ask a simple surface level question, which is better, the $50,000 car or the $20,000 car, you're going to assume that the $50,000 car is the better one. So I don't mind having a price that looks higher because I want to be perceived as better. I don't want to be perceived as everybody else. By the way, if a lot of photographers will say, how do I stand out from the crowd? Well, that's easy. Stop doing the same thing that everybody else is doing. It's that simple. Another way I like to say that is don't seek the seekers. Now, you've got to have a really strong marketing plan to get away with this one, but it works. Don't seek the seekers. That means if someone posts on Facebook that they're looking for an engagement photographer, how many photographers will put their name into the hat? 10, 20, 30, 50, 100? It doesn't matter. It's a crowd. And you just put yourself into the crowd. Do something to stand out. Now, if you don't have a good, strong marketing effort, if you haven't done very good, isolated, targeted marketing, then you've got to put yourself in the crowd. You don't have a choice. It's just going to be rough for you. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm saying it's not the best way to do your marketing. When you seek the seekers, What you're doing is you're going after someone who is basing their decision based on price. Now, why is that? Because they get information overwhelm. They keep on getting, and by the way, those who put their information on say it's Facebook group, someone's asked for an engagement photographer, you put your information there. How many people are just direct messaging them that you don't see? I bet you that number is at least the number that put their information on there. I would assume. I don't know. How could I know? I can't. Unless maybe I got a false account and said I need a photographer. Oh, I might try that. No, that's mean. I'm not going to waste people's time. But I'd be curious how many people actually are doing that. But either way, it is a crowd. And when you've got so much different, if you're the client, if you've got all this information coming at you, what becomes the differentiator to you? Because everything starts to look the same. The differentiator becomes the price. I don't want to be chosen based on price. I want to be chosen based on what I bring to the table, what it is that I do. And if I'm part of the crowd, I can't effectively do this. Now, can I be better than the next person there? Possibly. But still, that's not the point. The point is, if you've done a good job of targeting your market, you do not need to seek the seekers. If you have not done a good job of targeting your market, then you must seek the seekers. Otherwise, you're going to go out of business for sure. It's just a hard way to be in business. It's the hardest way. And that's how most of us do it. Number 4, always have a whopper, something so big, so crazy that no one in their right mind is ever going to choose it. On my price list, the most expensive thing on it is $8,000. No one's ever bought it. And I'm fine with that. But I can use that as a tool, psychological tool. Because everything, once I've said $8,000, everything else sounds like it's less than. How would you like for a price tag of $5,000 to be in the category of less than? Because for most of us, we don't have a single thing on our price list. It's $5,000. By the way, once someone does buy the most expensive thing on your price list, that means that's a clue to you. That's your flag saying you need a new Whopper. You need something that is crazy. By the way, when I photographed weddings, I had something on there that was. I don't know what if you guys do weddings or not, but my average wedding was how much was it? 5,000. I'll have to look back at my notes to know for sure. But the average in San Antonio is about 4,000 for a wedding photographer. That's average Joe. That's if well, right in the middle. My price for a wedding was 12,000, but they had line item veto. They could cross things off, so that the price would come down. That way, that 12,000 was the big one, but they could lower it down. So that therefore, a $7,000 wedding sounds like it's less than, because they're comparing to the 12. They're getting a $12,000 photographer for $7,000. That feels pretty good. So number 5, it's not the price as much as how you present the price. Look them in the eyes. Have some confidence. The package and collections are perfect for high school senior portraits, weddings, babies, boutique types like boudoir, but I almost always did a la carte. Now, let's say that you have defined your 8x10 price, what the appropriate price is. By the way, for most people, it's going to be 80 and over in order to make it work. For most, it's going to be greater than 80. For probably at least 50%, it's going to be at least 100, maybe 150 in order to make it work. Pricing formula, if your 8x10 is 150, then if you guys have your handout, you can see how I came up with prices. It's just multiplying these numbers, so you can have a price. Now, I want to point out 4x6 and 5x7. How much of a time difference does it take you if someone just ordered one 4x6, one 5x7, one 8x10? How much is the time difference for you? None. There's no difference in time. It's identical. The only difference is the cost of the print, which is very minor. 4x6 to 8x10, very minor difference in price. So therefore, I wouldn't have a huge amount of difference between these. By the way, there's a guy that I coached in Florida, who took this. Actually, I didn't coach him. We just talked. Anyway, he took this to the extreme. He said, oh, I've never thought about it that way. Well, if it doesn't take me that much time difference, then all my prices should be at this. He went to the extreme. He said, everything's $5,000. One price. You can have whatever size you want. Doesn't matter what the size is. The print is $5,000, period. That includes the session, includes all my time. It includes the print on your wall, includes the frame, it includes the installation. One price, $5,000. Takes all the questions out of your client's mind. They know what they're getting into because there's only one price. There's no potential for nickel and diming. Now, there are some other variables, but I'm not going into those other variables. It is something that worked for him. And the final one, number 8, raise your prices at least once a year. Better twice, and maybe on January 1st or and July 4th. That way you can remember it, and raise it 5%, 10%. Let's say it's 10%. Let's say your price is $400, and you raise your price by 10% to $440. Do you really think that you're going to lose a whole bunch of clients because of that? You're not. So raise your price. Besides, inflation causes you to lose money if you don't raise your price by at least the amount of inflation. That's just math. You guys have heard of this. You've been in an economics class, I bet. Are you uncomfortable when you share your prices? If anybody is uncomfortable when they get to the topic of price, give me a thumbs up. Let me know that you've had this experience, that you're uncomfortable when you start sharing your price to your client. Anybody? A little bit, depends. Yeah. Yep. I get a little, what's the feeling I get? It's kind of inside. It makes me feel just a slight bit uncomfortable, but I'm confident in my price. So therefore it doesn't change anything, but I am curious about how they're going to react to it. If you're uncomfortable when you share your price, I think that's a good thing. I think it should be slightly outside of your comfort zone. I think it should be more than you'd be willing to pay because you're a do-it-yourselfer. They aren't, not in this category. Your price, let's back this up a little bit. Whatever you feel is the right amount to make per hour, you have to multiply that by 3. And the reason, you've got expenses and you have taxes. And each one takes approximately a third. Now, that is a very general way to look at this. But if you're being paid, let's say you're being paid $10 an hour at your job, in order to replace that income, think about this. At your job, making $10 an hour, let's say you have a cubicle job. How much did you have to pay for the cubicle? Nothing. How much do you have to pay for the computer that's there? Nothing. About the electricity? How much about the water? How much? How about the software that's on it? What about the classes that you take to learn the software? How much of that did you have to pay for? None of it. When you're employed, you must pay for all of it. When you're self-employed, you must pay for all of it. So therefore, you have to take that into consideration. If you're making $10 an hour at some other work, and you were only making $10 an hour at your photography business, you will go out of business. You're going to have to charge at least 3 times that amount. That's extreme minimum. Shell asked about putting taxes. So that kind of tax is a sales tax. I believe that's what you're talking about. Sales tax, yes. Yeah, photographers do have to charge sales tax. You guys know this, right? Photographers must charge sales tax. Give me a thumbs up if you know you're supposed to charge sales tax. I'm not asking you if you do. It's not the topic of conversation today, but if you know, then yeah, you're supposed to add sales tax to what you do, including session fees. Now, I'm not an expert on that. I always believe it's best to reach out to someone who is an expert at that kind of thing. When it comes to taxes and legal stuff, don't get that from other photographers. I mean, get some ideas, but actually go to the source, those who are the professionals, those who do this kind of thing day in, day out. Those are the people to go to with those kind of questions. I'm going to share something with you guys real quick. And this will end this class when I share this with you. Share screen, income goal worksheet. All right. I'm hoping that you guys can see this Excel file on your screen right now.
Yep, I see it.
How much money would you like to bring in per year on that first line? And you put in whatever amount that you feel is appropriate. So if 100,000 is what you want to make in a year from your photography business, great. If it's some other number, that's great too. But if that 100,000 is just an easy number to work with because, well, it's a lot of zeros, then that means you're going to have to bring in 300,000 in order to bring in your 100,000. How many weeks off would you like to take per year? These are important variables. Most people will say greater than 2 weeks because that's about all they get at their job. Some of them get 4. So I put 6 here. You can put whatever number. If you want to take 2 months off, we'll put 8, whatever is appropriate for you. By the way, someone who I did this with, this is best done as a private class, by the way, because these numbers are really specific to you. And by the way, I do give a 30-minute private session just by asking for it. So we could do this as private. But one guy said, all right, I want August and January. He said, that's the time I went off. And I've never heard anyone say that before. I've heard people say, I want to take a 2-week vacation or two 1-week vacations or something. I've never heard anyone prior to this say, I want to take off August and January. But it sure made things easier because I could divide everything by 10 because that's the number of months he was going to be working. So that actually made my numbers a little easier to do in my head. The number of weeks you work per year is 52 minus that number. And so the weekly average you need to make in order to reach your goal, well, there it is right there, 6,500. If these were your numbers, then you need to bring in 6,500 every single week. So that means your average sale needs to be 1,600. That's a totally doable number right here in San Antonio and surrounding areas. And probably much of the US, that's a doable number. 1,600. Again, mine was 3,800. So this was not a problem. Total number of hours per year. This is taking the number of weeks times the number of hours. And then this means the amount you need to make per hour. So $217. Now, do not take that to mean you're charging people $200 an hour, because they, in their minds, are only paying for the amount of time they see you work. No, this is total time, not just working hours, total time. So in summary, if your goal is 300,000, then you need to have an average sale of 1,600. If you're going to do 4 sessions per week. By the way, you can put in whatever number you want there. But as you increase the number of sessions you want to do per week, your average sale drops. So I can share this with you guys. Do you guys want that? Do you want that Excel file? Give me a thumbs up if you want that Excel file, and I'll just share it with you. Cool. Stop that share. All right, so let me put that in here. All right, so while I'm doing that, Javi, could you tell us again about your special that you're doing?
Yeah, for sure. So like I said at the beginning of the meeting, we are Digital Pro Lab. We're running 40% off of 5x5, 5x7, and 8x10 Pro Luster and metallic prints. All you need to do, you can go online or you can go through any of the ordering systems that you downloaded through us. But the promo code is Snow Day. That's all one word, all lowercase, Snow Day. I put it in the chat earlier. I'll probably put it again. so that way you don't have to scroll to go find it. Yeah, no, we figured, everyone probably was either cooped up, snapping some photos around the house, or maybe you got out into the elements and took some photos to document the history. So we wanted to be able to let you guys print those. But of course, it didn't have to be snow photos. You could do a whole myriad of different things. So all photos are welcome. But yeah, like I said, that's 40% off, promo code Snow Day, and that is running until this Thursday. If you want to run down on any more of that information, like I said, I'll put it in the chat, but then you can also find it on our social media. Just search Digital Pro Lab.
Cool. Thank you, Javi.
Awesome. Thank you, Jim.
That's awesome. All right. So I know you guys were asking questions as we went along, but are there any that you held to the end? I'd be happy to take those on, and just unmute yourself and ask if you do want that, if you do have a question.
I've got a question. What do you think about the idea of offering what I've seen called collections, where it's already a pre-arranged arrangement of 4 or 5 different size frames that, fit together nicely with aspect ratios, and selling those as like a preset thing? What do you think about that?
Absolutely. And this is something that I think you would know, but just want to make sure that we're putting this out. We have to do a good job of selling it. So that means having it on a wall completed, not just not just something created in Photoshop, but I mean actually on a wall. I guess you could create that in Photoshop, but I want to see it on a wall. I want to experience it, and I want the family to be close to it. And so there's, in my opinion, there's 3 different ways to show off your work. One is just show a pretty photograph on the social media page, and let's just keep it to social media. So you show a pretty photograph. That's one way. Second is you photograph your pretty photograph on the wall that it's been displayed on. That's freaking awesome. But there's one better, and that's it being on the wall with the family or whoever it is that's in the photograph, being there, smiling, showing that they're enjoying this, because that says so much more than just the photograph.
Mm-hmm.
Because what you're selling is someone's reaction to the photograph. You want them to love it. Of course you do. But if you can't convey that, you're going to have a hard time selling it. So should you do stuff like that? Absolutely. It takes a little bit of planning, but I'm sure, Daniel, that's, you've probably done it before. It's probably easy for you to create something like that. But yeah, absolutely put things like that together. Now, obviously it has to be appropriate for the space. And so it may not be the right tool for everybody. So you're not trying to push this on anybody, but I can't imagine you even thinking about pushing something on somebody. So preaching to the choir here. Yeah, for sure. I never did much of that. I did some. I'm remembering one in particular. It was a dining room, and it was just a collage of 3 images. And the smallest images, I think, were 16 by 20s. Maybe they were 11 by 14s. But they were all 3 canvas. And it was one large one and then the 2 small ones that were next to it. So one was a square and the other 2 were horizontal images. But they just formed a large rectangle with the white line in between them. I wish I could just draw that. But absolutely, it's a good thing. They have to be able to see it in their mind before you do it, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay.
Did that answer your question? Is that where you were heading?
Yeah, I just didn't know if there's any drawbacks to that or what your experience was with that.
No, there's not any drawbacks. I mean, as far as the installation, it's a much more difficult installation.
Yeah. Maybe that's another good question that I'm sure other people want to know too, is how do you install these prints, especially complicated ones like that?
It's pretty much planned during that design consultation. So I already know what I'm going to be doing ahead of time. So that part is out of the way. It's done during the planning session. And generally I'll do a planning session in someone's home. But because of COVID, it's not always the case. I may be doing it via Zoom, like we're doing right here.
Yeah.
And so they're showing their area with their cell phone. They're just walking around their home with their cell phone, showing me different areas where this could go. And we plan a place, we choose it. And then I rely on them to size the areas. So take a tape measure and actually tell me what the size is in that space. The size matters more to me because I want to get it right. I want them not to worry about it. So I really don't want them to do that. But if I'm not there, then they have to. That's one reason why I really want to be in that space. I have my tape measure, and my tape measure has a Landers Photography logo on the side of it. And so when I set it down, they're like, oh, that's cool. And I said, do you have a tape measure? And they usually say yes. But if they say no, and I said, well, then that one's yours. And they think that's pretty darn cool. But still, I measure it because I want to know the size, but I don't want them to have to worry about it. Size and price are not the creative side of their mind. That's the or the emotional side. That's the logical side. And I want them to stay in that emotional side of their mind, because that's what this whole thing is about. People don't buy photography for logical reasons. They buy them for emotional ones. And so I want to keep things in the spirit of what's going on here. And the moment I take them out of emotional mind and put them into logical mind, and there's times when I have to do that, so I want to keep those brief. The moment I do that, I start losing them because their mind starts going off into other areas. But when they're on their emotional side, it's perfect. Everything goes very smoothly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions? If not, I want to encourage you to go to the Portrait Profits page on Facebook and the Portrait Profits. In fact, let's just go to one spot, portraitprofits.com. It'll have the link to Facebook, and it'll have the link to future upcoming events. It has a calendar schedule. It's called schedule. So you can go to, and I'll put it in the chat. So again, it's portraitprofits.com. And that's just a website. There's very little there. It's not going to take you but 2 minutes to look at everything there is that's there. So Portrait Profits, but then click on the Facebook link so that you can add yourself to that group, because that will be where we have most of the announcements. Plus, I think we have everybody that's here. I think we have all your email addresses. Did you guys get an email from me this morning? It would have been about 9:15.
I got your message.
About this via email or a different way?
Messenger, Facebook message. I didn't get.
So you didn't see an email? Okay.
I don't think I did.
Amber or Michelle or Miguel. Hi, Miguel. Did you guys receive it via email? Because it's supposed to have come this morning via email. I guess it might mount up in a spam folder.
I don't recall. I just found it about 15 minutes before on Facebook, I think it was. So
okay. Miguel saw it. He says exactly 9:15. All right, cool. Nice to know that my email went out. I was getting a little concerned because I sent that out to my list that had about 3,000 or 4,000 emails on it. I need to send it out to my complete list at some point. I have 14,000 emails, but once they go cold, meaning there's been no interaction for about 6 months or so, then it doesn't do any good to send them that. It hurts on the email side, because when you send out a whole lot of emails and there's no interaction, and there's a couple of who, by the way, when you click on the spam on your email, make sure you're doing that with bad companies, not with companies you like, because you can just unsubscribe. When you click on "this is spam," you're effectively telling on them to the federal government. You're adding them to a watch list when you click on spam. So therefore, if you like the company, you just don't want to receive the emails anymore, just click the unsubscribe. Does that make sense?
Didn't know that.
Yep. Yeah, don't report them to the government. Yeah, clicking on spam is reporting. It's the Canned Spam Act of 2003. And so it reports them to the government, puts them on a list.
Canned spam or canned spam?
It's, can, C-A-N. In other words, can it stop the spam.
I
But
detect
it
a
was,
pun there. There's definitely a
yeah,
pun in there.
it's funny. And it was written by, people up in DC who in 2003 didn't have a good understanding of what email and spam was.
Oh
And
boy.
so there are so many, there's loopholes for the bad guys, and there are no loopholes for the good guys.
Hmm.
So it's fry it up. That's funny, Miguel. I love it. All right. So were there any other announcements we needed to make? Javi, you said what you needed to say, unless you had more. You're good. Okay. Again, go to portraitprofits.com and let me one more time send the income goal worksheet, just in case you guys didn't get that. That's the form that we went over just a little while ago, where you enter in your own numbers. Make sure to follow directions on that, because there are some areas that you need to change, and there's some areas you have to leave alone. Otherwise, you mess with the algorithm that's in there. You mess with the numbers. So there's only 4 areas. There's only 4 spots that you change, just 4. Reminds me of Jeff Davis. There's only one number to remember, and that's 4.
4, 4, 4, 4.
Sorry, guys.
4, 4, 4, 4.
Hey, that marketing works, huh?
Oh, it absolutely works.
Take notes.
So, so there's only 4 spaces that you can change. If you're changing other ones, you're going to mess up the algorithm, and the form will not work any longer. But when you enter in the amount of money you want to make, the amount of weeks you want off per year, the amount of jobs you want to do per year, you get all of these additional pieces of information that tell you what your average price should be, how much you should be, what you are worth per hour. And I know people get upset. You're not worth, if you're worth something per hour, that's a bad thing. No, this is business. This is math. You need to know how much you're worth per hour. This is just doing your numbers. This is just your responsibility as a business owner. So don't get into the feelings part of this. This is just numbers. Leave the feelings for other things. We want feelings in our photography side, not in our business side. So, all right. So if anyone wants to stay afterwards a little bit, I'll hang on for just a little bit if you've got some questions. But otherwise, thank you guys so much for joining this episode of Portrait Profits. Again, this is every single Monday at noon, except for the second Monday of every single month, and that will be in the evening. And that's just to accommodate different people's schedules, because not everybody can make it during the workday. And so thank you guys for being here at this time. And the next one is going to be a week from today, again, at noon. Please tell your friends and those people who you care about. And thank you for being here. Bye for now.